I was 3 months old when my parents dropped me off at my grandfather's house and never came back. For 28 years, they were strangers who occasionally remembered I existed when they needed money. Then my grandfather passed away and left me his entire $5 million estate, and suddenly these two people who abandoned me as a baby were sitting in a lawyer's office claiming I stole their inheritance. They had no idea I'd been recording every conversation, documenting every rejection, preparing for this moment since I was 16 years old. What happened next would expose decades of lies and destroy the family they built while pretending I never existed. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment and let me know where you're viewing from. I want to know I'm not the only one who's dealt with family showing up only when there's money involved. My name is Camila Torres, and the first memory I have is of my grandfather Raymond reading me bedtime stories in his small house in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I was maybe 4 years old, and I remember asking him where my mommy and daddy were. He got very quiet, kissed my forehead, and said, "You've got me, little bird." That's all you need to know right now. I didn't understand then what had happened. I didn't know that my parents, Jennifer and Michael Torres, had both been in their early 20s when I was born. I didn't know that 3 months after my birth, they'd shown up at my grandfather's door with me in a car seat, 2 bags of baby clothes, and a story about needing just a few weeks to get back on their feet. I didn't know that those few weeks turned into months, then years, then forever. Before I tell you about the inheritance battle that would tear apart everything, hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real stories about abandoned children who built lives despite the families that threw them away. These stories might help you understand you're not alone. My grandfather Raymond was a quiet man who worked as an electrician for 40 years. He lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in a working-class neighborhood. He drove a 15-year-old truck. He shopped with coupons and fixed everything himself rather than hiring help. To anyone looking from the outside, he was just a regular blue-collar guy living a simple life. What nobody knew, not even me until much later, was that my grandfather was a secret millionaire. He had invested wisely his entire adult life. He bought rental properties when real estate was cheap. He put money into index funds and never touched them. He lived below his means and let his wealth grow silently in the background. By the time I came to live with him, he was worth close to $3 million. By the time he died, that number had grown to just over $5 million. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about growing up as the abandoned granddaughter. My childhood with Grandpa Raymond was filled with love, but also questions. Other kids had parents who picked them up from school. I had my grandfather. Other kids spent holidays with big families. I spent them with Grandpa Raymond and sometimes his friend Walter from work. Other kids talked about their moms and dads. I learned not to ask about mine because the look of pain on my grandfather's face wasn't worth it. When I was 7, my mother Jennifer called. It was the first time I'd heard her voice that I could remember. She told me happy birthday, asked a few generic questions about school, then said she'd visit soon. She didn't visit. She called again 8 months later asking my grandfather for $2,000 for an emergency. I heard him on the phone, his voice tight with anger, telling her no. She hung up on him. That became the pattern. My parents would disappear for months or years, then suddenly appear asking for money. Sometimes they'd include me in the conversation, acting like loving parents who were just going through temporary hard times. Sometimes they'd ignore me completely and deal only with my grandfather. He gave them money a few times in those early years, always hoping it might bring them back into my life properly. It never did. When I was 10, they showed up in person for the first time in years. I was so excited I could barely breathe. My mom and dad were here. They were going to take me to dinner, spend time with me, maybe explain why they'd been gone. Instead, they spent 20 minutes in the living room talking to my grandfather in hushed, angry voices. I heard words like responsibility, and she's your daughter, and we never agreed to this being permanent. Then they left. My grandfather found me crying in my room and held me while I sobbed. "Why don't they want me?" I asked him. "It's not about wanting you, little bird. Some people aren't built to be parents. They're too selfish, too broken. But that's their failure, not yours. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." By the time I was 13, I stopped hoping my parents would come back. I stopped making excuses for them in my head. I started seeing them for what they were, Two people who had created a child they didn't want and dumped that responsibility on an elderly man who had already raised his own kids. My grandfather never complained. He came to every school event. He taught me to ride a bike, helped me with homework, and worked extra jobs when money was tight to make sure I had what I needed. He wasn't rich in the way he lived, remember. He was saving and investing, but our daily life was modest. I wore thrift store clothes and we ate home-cooked meals. I didn't mind. I had something more valuable than money. I had someone who actually loved me. When I was 16, something shifted. My grandfather sat me down for a serious conversation. He was 71 years old then, still healthy, but starting to think about the future. "Camila, I need to tell you some things," he said. "About money, about your parents, about what happens when I'm gone." He explained his finances to me for the first time. The investments, the properties, the wealth he'd built. I was shocked. We lived so simply that I'd assumed we were just getting by. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I'm leaving it all to you. Everything. And I need you to be prepared for what's going to happen when I do." He explained that my parents knew he had some money, but not how much. They'd been asking him for loans and handouts for years. He predicted that when he died and they found out about the real size of his estate, they would fight for it. They would claim I manipulated him, that as his daughter Jennifer was the rightful heir, that I didn't deserve what I hadn't earned. "I want you to start documenting everything," he told me. "Every time they call asking for money, write it down. Every time they make promises and break them, keep track. Every birthday they miss, every holiday they skip. I'm going to do the same. We're building a case, little bird. When the time comes, you're going to need proof of who these people really are." From that day forward, I kept meticulous records. I saved every voicemail from my parents asking for money. I documented every missed birthday and holiday. I wrote down every promise they made and broke. My grandfather did the same, keeping a detailed journal of every interaction with his daughter and son-in-law. The recording started when I was 18. New Mexico is a one-party consent state, which means I could legally record phone conversations as long as I was part of them. Every time my parents called, I recorded it. Every empty promise, every request for money, every time they forgot my birthday or got my age wrong, it was all captured. I went to college at the University of New Mexico, staying close to home to be near my grandfather. I studied accounting and business, practical fields that would help me manage the inheritance I knew was coming someday. My parents came to exactly 0 college events. They didn't help with tuition. They called twice during my 4 years there, both times asking my grandfather for money. After graduation, I got a job at an accounting firm in Albuquerque. I moved into a small apartment 10 minutes from my grandfather's house. By then he was 77 and starting to slow down. I spent every weekend with him, helping around the house and just enjoying his company. These were precious years, and I knew they were numbered. My parents called on my 25th birthday. My mother's voice was cheerful and fake. "Happy birthday, sweetie. How are you? What are you up to these days?" I was recording, as always. "I'm good, Mom. Working as an accountant. Living nearby Grandpa so I can help him out." "That's wonderful. You're such a good granddaughter. Listen, your dad and I are going through a tough patch financially. We were wondering if maybe Grandpa could help us out with about $5,000. Just until we get back on our feet." 25 years of abandonment, and she called to wish me happy birthday and ask for money in the same conversation. I told her I'd pass along the message. My grandfather said no. She didn't call again for 14 months. When I was 27, my grandfather was diagnosed with lung cancer. He'd smoked in his younger years and quit decades ago, but the damage was done. The doctors gave him 6 months to maybe a year. I took family leave from work to care for him. I moved back into his house. I was there for every doctor's appointment, every bad night, every moment of fear and pain. I called my parents to tell them. They expressed sympathy and said they'd try to visit. They didn't visit. Not once during his entire illness. They called 3 times during those final months, always asking how he was doing, always asking if he needed anything, never offering to help or come see him themselves. 2 weeks before my grandfather died, he had his lawyer come to the house. Walter was there too, serving as a witness. My grandfather was weak but lucid. He reviewed his will one final time, making sure everything was clear and legally sound. "It all goes to Camila," he said firmly. "The house, the properties, the investments, everything. She's the only one who's been here. She's the only one who deserves it." His lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Delgado, nodded. "It's ironclad, Raymond. I made sure of it. And we have documentation of Camila's care for you, her presence in your life, everything that matters." My grandfather looked at me with tears in his eyes. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me, little bird. I got to be a father twice in my life, and the second time, with you, I got it right. I'm sorry your parents failed you. I'm sorry I couldn't fix that. But I made sure you'll be taken care of. You gave me everything, Grandpa. You gave me love. The money doesn't matter compared to that. The money matters because it means you'll never have to depend on anyone who doesn't value you. It means you're free." Raymond Torres died on a Tuesday morning in March with me holding his hand. He was 79 years old. The last thing he said to me was, "Remember everything I taught you. Stand strong. Don't let them take what's yours." The funeral was small. Walter was there, a few of my grandfather's old friends from work, some neighbors, and my boss from the accounting firm who'd become a friend. My parents showed up, which surprised me. They hadn't visited during his illness, but they came to his funeral. My mother Jennifer was 52 now, my father Michael 54. They looked older than I expected, worn down by whatever life they'd been living without me in it. They hugged me and cried and said all the right things about what a great man my grandfather was. I recorded every word on my phone in my pocket. After the service, my father pulled me aside. "We should talk about the house and your grandfather's affairs. We'll need to go through everything, figure out what needs to be handled." "Patricia Delgado, his lawyer, is handling the estate," I said carefully. "She'll be in touch with everyone who needs to be involved." Of course. We just want to help. This is a family matter. Family matter." These people who'd abandoned me at 3 months old and barely acknowledged my existence for 28 years were suddenly very interested in family matters. The will reading was scheduled for the following week. My parents insisted on being there, claiming they had a right as my grandfather's daughter and son-in-law. Patricia allowed it, though she told me privately that they had no legal standing if they weren't named in the will. We met at Patricia's office on a Friday afternoon. I sat on one side of the conference table. My parents sat on the other, both dressed nicely like they were going to a job interview. Patricia sat at the head with a thick folder in front of her. "This is the last will and testament of Raymond Torres," she began. "Executed 6 months ago and reviewed 2 weeks before his death. Mr. Torres was of sound mind and body when this will was created and when it was last reviewed." She went through the legal language, the formal declarations. Then she got to the important part. "To my granddaughter Camila Torres, who has been my joy and my purpose for the past 28 years, I leave my entire estate. This includes my home at 445 Mesa Drive, my 3 rental properties, all investment accounts, all savings, and all personal property. The current estimated value of this estate is approximately $5.2 million. The silence in the room was absolute. My parents stared at Patricia like she'd spoken in a foreign language. "I'm sorry," my mother finally said. "Did you say the entire estate?" "Yes, but I'm his daughter. How can he leave me nothing?" "He can leave his estate to whomever he chooses. He chose to leave it to Camila." My father's face turned red. "This is wrong. This is completely wrong. Camila must have manipulated him. He was sick, he was dying, she took advantage. Mr. Torres created this will 6 months before his death when he was in perfect health. He reviewed it multiple times. He was very clear about his intentions. I don't care how clear he was. I'm contesting this." My mother's voice was shaking with anger. "That money should go to me. I'm his daughter, not her." "Actually, I'm his granddaughter," I said quietly. "Your daughter. The one you abandoned at 3 months old and barely spoke to for 28 years. We didn't abandon you," my father snapped. "We left you with family temporarily because we were struggling." "That's not abandonment." "Temporarily? It's been 28 years. We always meant to come back. Life just got complicated." Patricia cleared her throat. "If you wish to contest the will, you're welcome to try. However, I should warn you that Mr. Torres anticipated this possibility. We have extensive documentation of Camila's relationship with him and your relationship with him. The court will see a very clear picture of who was actually present in his life. We'll see about that, my mother said, standing up. Get a lawyer, Michael. We're not letting some girl who's not even really family steal what should be ours. I'm not really family? The words came out before I could stop them. I lived with him for 28 years. I took care of him when he was dying. Where were you? We're going, my father said, pulling my mother toward the door. You'll be hearing from our attorney. After they left, Patricia looked at me with concern. Are you okay? I knew this was coming. Grandpa warned me years ago. Do you have the documentation he mentioned? The records of their absence. I pulled out my phone and opened the app where I'd been storing everything for 12 years. I have recordings of every phone call since I was 18. Written records going back to when I was 16. Dates and details of every missed birthday, every broken promise, every time they asked him for money. I have all of it. Patricia smiled. Then we're ready for them. The lawsuit was filed 3 weeks later. My parents claimed that I had unduly influenced my grandfather, that I had isolated him from his family, that I had manipulated a sick old man into leaving me his fortune. They claimed that as his biological daughter, Jennifer had a moral and legal right to inherit his estate. They demanded that the will be thrown out and the estate divided according to state inheritance laws, which would give the bulk of it to my mother. Patricia filed our response with a mountain of evidence. Phone records showing years of absence from my parents. Financial records showing my grandfather repeatedly giving them money that was never repaid. My detailed documentation of 28 years of neglect. Character statements from Walter, from neighbors, from my grandfather's doctors. And then there were the recordings. Hours and hours of phone calls where my parents asked for money, made promises they didn't keep, and demonstrated over and over that they only contacted my grandfather when they needed something. The case went to court 6 months after my grandfather's death. My parents had hired an attorney, some guy named Robert Chin, who seemed to specialize in estate disputes. He was smooth and professional, but he wasn't prepared for what we had. The courtroom wasn't dramatic like on TV. It was just a regular room with a judge, a court reporter, lawyers, and the people involved. My parents sat with their attorney looking confident. I sat with Patricia feeling nervous, but prepared. My parents' attorney went first, painting a picture of a daughter who'd been kept from her inheritance by a manipulative granddaughter. He talked about how Jennifer had struggled as a young mother, how she'd made the difficult decision to temporarily place me with my grandfather while she got her life together. How that temporary situation had unfortunately become permanent through no fault of her own. My clients always intended to rebuild their relationship with their daughter, Robert said. They were prevented from doing so by Mr. Torres, who wanted to keep Camila to himself. He poisoned her against them, and now that he's dead, she's been rewarded for that alienation with $5 million that rightfully belongs to Mr. Torres' actual child. Then it was Patricia's turn. She didn't waste time on dramatics. She simply presented the evidence. Phone records showing that over 28 years, my parents had initiated contact with my grandfather approximately 47 times. Of those 47 times, 43 included requests for money. Financial records showing that my grandfather had given them over $60,000 over the years, none of it repaid. My documentation of missed birthdays. In 28 years, my parents had remembered my birthday exactly 8 times. They'd attended 0 school events, 0 graduations, 0 major life moments. Medical records from my grandfather's final illness showing that I was listed as his primary caregiver and emergency contact. Visitor logs from his oncologist's office showing that I attended every appointment. Testimony from his hospice nurse confirming that I was the only family member present during his final months. Then Patricia played the recordings. The judge listened to my mother calling on my 25th birthday, wishing me well, and asking for $5,000 in the same breath. A call from my father 3 years earlier asking my grandfather for $10,000 to invest in a business opportunity, promising to pay it back with interest. He never did. A particularly damaging recording from 2 years ago where my mother had called my grandfather and said, "I don't understand why you waste your time and money on that girl. She's not your responsibility anymore. You've done enough. Let her figure out her own life and help us instead." My grandfather's response on the recording was quiet but firm. Camila is my responsibility because you made her my responsibility when you abandoned her. She's become my daughter in every way that matters. When I die, she gets everything. You get nothing. That's what you've earned. The courtroom was silent after that recording played. My mother was crying. My father looked furious. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Margaret Clarkson, reviewed the evidence for a long moment. Then she looked at my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Torres, I've reviewed the documentation presented by both sides. The evidence is overwhelming that you were largely absent from both your daughter's life and your father's life. The evidence shows that over nearly 3 decades, your primary interaction with Mr. Raymond Torres was to request financial assistance. The evidence shows that Camila Torres provided care, companionship, and genuine relationship to her grandfather while you provided neither. Your Honor, we were young when she was born, my mother pleaded. We made mistakes, but we always loved her. Love is demonstrated through action, not declaration, Judge Clarkson said. The actions documented here show an absence of love. They show an absence of care. They show an absence of basic parental responsibility. She looked at me. Miss Torres, did you influence your grandfather in creating his will? No, Your Honor. He told me years before he died what his plans were. I didn't ask for the inheritance. I just wanted time with him. The evidence supports that. Mr. Raymond Torres made his decisions with sound mind and clear intention. He chose to leave his estate to the person who actually cared for him and built a life with him. She looked back at my parents. Your contest is denied. The will stands as written. Camila Torres is the sole beneficiary of Raymond Torres' estate. This court finds no evidence of undue influence, manipulation, or grounds to overturn Mr. Torres' clear wishes. She banged her gavel. Case dismissed. My parents sat frozen in shock. Their attorneys started gathering his papers, clearly not surprised by the outcome. Patricia squeezed my hand. As we walked out of the courtroom, my mother grabbed my arm. How can you do this to us? We're your parents. I looked at her, this stranger who'd given birth to me 28 years ago and then disappeared. You're not my parents. You're people who created me and left me. There's a difference. We deserve something. We deserve part of that money. You deserve exactly what Grandpa left you. Nothing. That's what you earned through 28 years of neglect and selfishness. You're a cold person, Camila. I hope you can live with yourself. I can live with myself just fine. Can you? They walked away, and I never saw them again. I heard through Walter that they tried to appeal the decision but were denied. I heard they considered other legal action but couldn't find an attorney willing to take the case. Eventually, they gave up and disappeared back into whatever lives they'd been living without me. The inheritance changed my life, but not in the ways people might expect. I didn't quit my job or buy expensive things. I kept working because I enjoyed it. I kept living modestly because that's what my grandfather taught me. I did use some of the money to travel, to see the world my grandfather had always wanted to see but never had the chance. I set up a scholarship fund in my grandfather's name for children being raised by grandparents or other relatives. I wanted other kids like me to have opportunities and support. I invested the rest wisely, following the same principles my grandfather had taught me. 2 years after my grandfather's death, I was going through some boxes of his things that I'd stored in his house, the house that was now mine. I found his journals, the ones he'd kept documenting his relationship with my parents and with me. Reading them broke my heart and healed it at the same time. He'd written about the pain of watching his daughter abandon her child. He'd written about the joy of raising me, of getting a second chance to be a parent. He'd written about his fear that my parents would try to take everything from me after he died and his determination to prevent that. One entry from 10 years before his death stood out. Camila asked me today why her parents don't love her. I didn't know how to explain that some people are so broken, so selfish, that they can't love anyone but themselves. I told her it wasn't her fault. I hope she believes that. I hope she knows how extraordinary she is, how much joy she's brought to my life. I hope when I'm gone and Jennifer tries to take everything, Camila is strong enough to fight. I've given her the tools. I've built the case. I just hope it's enough to protect her. It was enough, Grandpa. Everything you did was enough. I still live in Albuquerque. I still work as an accountant, though now I do it part-time and spend the rest of my time managing my grandfather's properties and running the scholarship foundation. I've built a life that honors the man who raised me, the man who chose me every single day when my biological parents chose to walk away. My parents were right about one thing: I'm not really their family. Family isn't just about blood. It's about showing up. It's about sacrifice. It's about love demonstrated through action. My grandfather was my family. The friends I've made, the community I've built, they're my family. My parents are just two people I share DNA with, nothing more. The inheritance wasn't about the money. It was about validation. It was my grandfather's final way of saying, "You mattered to me. You were worth everything." And I'm making sure the world knows that. It was his protection against people who would have taken from me simply because they felt entitled to what they never earned. 3 years after the court case, I got a letter from my mother. No return address, just a short note. "I hope you're happy with your money. I hope it keeps you warm at night since you clearly don't care about family." I threw it away without responding, because she still didn't understand. The money wasn't what kept me warm at night. The memories of my grandfather did. The knowledge that I was loved completely and unconditionally by a man who had every right to be bitter about caring for his grandchild, but instead chose to see it as a blessing. That's what I had. That's what no amount of money could buy and no legal case could take away. My parents left me at 3 months old. They showed up 28 years later, demanding an inheritance they hadn't earned from a man they hadn't cared for. They learned the hard way that you can't abandon someone and then claim rights to their legacy. You can't disappear for decades and then act entitled to what was built without you. My grandfather left me $5 million, but the real inheritance was the lesson he taught me: that family is who shows up, that love is proven through action, that you don't owe loyalty to people who never gave it to you, and that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is ensuring they're protected long after you're gone. I visit his grave every Sunday. I tell him about my life, about the scholarship recipients, about the world I'm seeing on his behalf. And I thank him for choosing me, for fighting for me, for making sure that, even after death, he could protect me from people who never deserved to call themselves my family. Have you ever had family members who disappeared from your life and then showed up when there was something to gain? Have you dealt with relatives who only saw you as a resource rather than a person? How did you handle it? Share your stories in the comments below. I want to hear how you protected yourself from people who didn't earn their place in your life. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real stories about standing up to toxic family members and honoring the people who truly loved us. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they don't owe anything to people who abandon them just because they share blood. Thank you for watching, and remember, family is who shows up, not who shows up with lawyers demanding what they never earned.